As you go along your merry way and you start to grow, as you start to do a little bit of personal work, as you start to work on the ego, there are some things that are going to happen along your way. There's something what the mystics call dark days of the soul. And what causes this is, in some ways, the ego starts to fight back. When it starts to lose control and it sees that you're actually doing some real work, it doesn't like this. And so keep in mind, the ego's tools are fear, panic, and anxiety. All your life you've been taught things by your schools, by your ancestors, by the people who raised you about how you're supposed to act and how you're supposed to be. Those reactions that you've learned from your ancestors, like it was good enough for Uncle so-and-so, so it's good enough for me. Well, instead of acting out in rage or anger or fear, as you start to grow, you start to see why other people do the things that they do. And instead of acting out of fear, you're starting to stop, you're starting to think, and you're starting to act out of love and compassion. You're changing everything about yourself. Well, the ego does have a consciousness all of its own, and it's separate from you, and yet it is together at the same time. So it will start to fight back. And what I'm talking about by dark days of the soul is, for my father and for a lot of teachers that I've had throughout my life, there was a period of years for us because our egos got so big. And when dark days of the soul set in, the fear, panic, and anxiety attacks would happen to us for 2-3 hours at a time, sometimes twice a day. And for a lot of us, this went on for, a year, 2 years, 2.5. I had one teacher that had it happen for 3 years. She did all of her partying and raising hell down in New Orleans on Bourbon Street. She got so bad, all of her fingernails and toenails turned black and fell off. It literally scared the hell out of her. But this is a natural part of waking up. This is something that you might have to go through. It depends upon how way out there you went, and how fast you want to grow, and how much you want to change deep down inside. There's about 4 different little stories I want to share with you at this point, and this has to do with what some of the mystics call dark night of the soul. One of the stories is one about the Buddha, and if you watch a movie called Little Buddha, you can see what I'm talking about. In that movie, Buddha actually meets with this being, and you'll see somewhere in the movie that at one point he's sitting there meditating and he's facing this army. He's having a vision, and this army shoots these thousands of arrows at him, and these arrows they're coming at him. And normally you or I, if we were in that position, we would run out of fear and go hide behind a tree so we wouldn't get hit. He just sort of sits there and smiles, and before the arrows get to him, they all turn into these little flower petals and they hit the ground. Well, during the next scene, Buddha, he's overcome his fears, and he sort of realizes what's going on. And he looks down into this pool of water that's sitting in front of him, and his hand comes up. And so he reaches out and he grabs this hand, and he pulls it up. And when this being comes up out of this little pool there, Buddha's sitting there looking at himself. And he's talking to this being, and it's asking him, things about his life, and basically this being wants to run his life, and Buddha's like, no, you can't run my life anymore. And this being, asks him some questions and tries to make a deal and squirms, and near the end of it, he asks him, he says, well, what about me? And he says, we'll be fine. We'll walk together for a while. And this is that thing I talked about earlier on, who serves whom? Do I serve my ego, or does it serve me? We can move on to another story. The Christians have a story where Jesus is up on the hill, and he's fasting for 4 days and 4 nights with no sleep, no water. He's up there praying, and his intent is to talk to his ancestors. Well, on about the 3rd or the 4th day, Satan or the devil appears to him, and he comes and he tries to make a deal. And he says, look out at all this that's around you. He said, as far as you can see, and if you'll follow me and do as I say, I'll make you Lord and Master of everything you see. And Jesus turns him down and says, get thee behind me, Satan. because of what happened to my father, I know now that that was not the devil or Satan. That's just Jesus's ego. The Christian world really couldn't handle the fact that they had that dark side with them, and so they put it on the outside of them during that story. And looking at all three or four of these things that happened is what helped me put together what was really going on. There's another movie that came out in the late 60s and the 70s, and these were the Billy Jack movies. And a man called Rolling Thunder, he had another name besides that, but that was his medicine name, helped them put together these movies. And Billy Jack went out. The Native Americans have something similar called Vision Quest to what the Christ did. It's 4 days and nights with no food, no water, no sleep, and you're out there crying for a vision. You go out there to talk to your ancestors. It's the same thing in the Christian teachings, only I don't see any Christians going out and doing what the Native Americans have been doing all along, or what I go do every now and then myself. But on one of these vision quests that Billy Jack went to, he went down into a cave and he met this being, and it had either red or blue eyes. I don't remember. It's been so long since I watched this movie. But it came and it tried to make a deal with him too. And at one point, it changed from being this beast to it looked just like Billy Jack. And so he was sitting there facing himself. That was Dark Night of the Soul, where your ego comes and you're trying to make a final deal. So when we move on to the future, this would be probably in 1980s, early 1990s. My father had a night where he came in, he was quite startled, and he said, I had this being come into the bedroom, and when it came in, it was a physical being. You could actually see it and touch it and all that. And he said, but when it came in, it smelled like death, and I could smell fire and brimstone all around it. For my dad and him being a Christian mystic, he would see the archetype of the ego a lot like this. And it came into him and it tried to make a deal with him. He said, you follow me and you do everything I tell you to, I'll make you the most famous psychic the world has ever seen. Well, Dark Days of the Soul is the ego fighting you and just using your fear, panic, and anxiety. At the physical level, what this is about is that when you're out there in the world and things happen, your ego is like your autopilot for your body. It pumps all these chemicals out in your body. So when you see this thing happening, you normally react. So it could be out of fear, anger, panic, anxiety, just whatever anybody does to you. You have these things which you're trained to, and your ego is responsible for getting your body ready for fight or flight, or just to get angry and get into somebody's face. Or as you start to grow and you start to awaken, you find out that living like this doesn't work anymore. It actually hurts you on the inside, being angry and being pissed off and going after people and stuff. You get to a point when you start to grow, you can't do this anymore. It actually hurts. And so the ego sees that you're slipping away from its control. And its first line of defense is the fear, panic, and anxiety attacks, which we call Dark Days of the Soul. And if you get far enough along in this, like a lot of the mystics do, or like my father did, I haven't had this happen to me yet, you can actually physically meet your ego and it will come and try to make a deal with you. As we move along in life and we start to make this shift between duality consciousness and non-duality, one thing we're going to wake up and find is that we as human beings are far greater than anything we have ever dreamed or imagined. We had an inventor and a scientist a while back, and he tried to tell us, he tried to warn us about something. He said, all this technology and stuff that we're discovering, it's great, and it's a wonderful thing, and it's going to help humanity. But one thing we might ought to do is slow down and give our humanity a chance to catch up to our technology before we destroy ourselves. This man was Einstein, and he worked on nuclear weapons early on, before these things were a reality. It's another thing you need to know about duality consciousness and our shift into non-duality. There was a book written a while back, a bunch of scientists and researchers, they went out to an island and the book was called The 100th Monkey. In this book, they went out and they taught these monkeys on this island how to use a tool in a certain way. And best I can remember, I think it had to do something with how to use a stick to gather up termites. And what they discovered was one of the researchers showed one monkey how to do this, and he showed a few more monkeys. And then when it reached a certain amount of monkeys that were doing this, they all started doing it. Well, that wasn't the extraordinary part about all this, and it wasn't why they called the book The 100th Monkey. What they found out later was there was an island just a few miles away from this island where they were working, and the same kind of monkeys were there. Well, when they went there, there was no way for these monkeys from one island to get to the monkeys to the other island. And what they found out was these monkeys had some way that the scientists did not understand to get this information from one island to the other. It wasn't transferred because some monkey went from here to there. So there was something unseen. And what that was our collective subconscious mind. We have a collective, and once a certain amount of us start to wake up and make this shift from duality consciousness to non-duality, what we're going to find out is we're going to wake up one morning and we're all going to be making this shift. You might want to ask yourself a question. If we don't evolve consciously, if we don't make this shift from duality to non-duality consciousness, if we don't develop this connection with something greater than ourselves, if we don't start caring about other human beings at least as much as we care about ourselves, what's going to happen to us? Well, this is what Einstein saw, and I'm using an analogy. It's a fact that we are knocking down UFOs and ETs, and we're stealing their technology, and we're using it. We have been for years. People don't realize this or believe in it. Hey, there's nothing I can do to help you out, but in the future it will become apparent. And it's with the History Channel coming out with this ancient alien stuff, it's becoming common knowledge now. But think of the human race as like a bunch of chimpanzees. And this is what could happen to us. This is the analogy I'm using. Take a bunch of these chimpanzees and put them in a room, and then in that room put this crate and take the top off the crate. Leave the chimpanzees in the crate in there together and shut the door and walk away. And all of a sudden you look down in the crate and you realize, wow, this thing's full of hand grenades. And we got a room full of chimpanzees. How long is it going to take for some ego-centered, self-centered SOB to reach down in that crate, pull out a hand grenade, pull a pin, and throw it to somebody else? This is the kind of thing that could happen. I mean, look at Fukushima over there. We build nuclear power plants, and we don't take into account tidal waves, earthquakes. We don't take into account of what we're going to do with all the waste. How many other things are we messing with out there that we're not thinking ahead and looking and wondering what are the generations ahead of us going to do? How are they going to handle the messes that we are making? These are the kind of questions that we need to wake up and start asking.